Hi everyone. Today we are doing notes for 3.2 compound statements and connectives. So this is express compound statements in symbolic form. Simple statement. This conveys one idea with no connecting words. So again, a simple statement conveys one idea with no connecting words. Compound statement. These are statements formed by combining two or more simple statements. Again, a compound statement is statements formed by combining two or more simple statements. Connectives. This is used to join simple statements to form a compound statement. So again, connectives, these are used to join simple statements to form a compound statement. Examples of connectives that we're going to be using are the words and, or, if, then, and then last, if, and only if. Okay. Next we have a conjunction. And a conjunction, this is if P and Q represent two simple statements, then the compound statement P and Q is symbolized by P and then it's like an upside down V is the and symbol, Q. So again, a conjunction. If P and Q represents two simple statements, then the compound statement P and Q is symbolized by P, and then that's their and symbol, Q. So here's our first example. So P represents the statement, it is after 5 p.m. Q represents the statement, they are working. We're going to write this compound statement in symbolic form. So I want you to take a minute or two and write each of these in symbolic form. Okay, so for A, they are working and it is after 5 p.m. So they are working, that is part Q. And this is our and symbol. It is after 5 p.m. That is our sentence P. So this is going to look like Q and P. For B, it is not after 5 p.m. So that's the negation of P. And is our and symbol. They are working is Q. So this one will look like not P and Q. Now, different ways that we can say this and in English, the first way we talked about is this represents P and Q. You could also say this as P but Q. You could say this as P yet Q. Or you could also say P nevertheless Q. Okay, any of those four English statements all represent the conjunction P and Q. It's just a variety of ways of saying it. Next, we have the disjunction. If P and Q represent two simple statements, then the compound statement P or Q or both is symbolized by P, and then this just looks like a V, Q. And that's how you write P or Q. So for our example here, P represents the statement you graduate. Q represents the statement you satisfy the math requirement. I want you to take a few minutes and write these two compound statements in symbolic form. Okay, for A, you graduate or satisfy the math requirement. So you graduate is P, or satisfy the math requirement, that is Q. So this will just look like P or Q. Next we have you satisfy the math requirement, so that is Q, or you do not graduate, so that's negation of P. So this is Q or not P. Next we have the conditional statement. So this says the compound statement, if P then Q, this is symbolized by P arrow Q. Okay, and we have special names for the beginning and ending part of the if-then statement. The first part of the statement is called the antecedent. And the second part is called the consequent. Okay? So for example 3 here, a person is a father, a person is male. If we write these compound statements in symbolic form, for A, we have if a person is a father, then that person is male. So again, we have this is if then. So I'm going to circle both parts here to represent our symbol. We write the symbol by the then. A person is a father, this is P. That person is male, this is Q. So we have P arrow Q represents if P then Q. For B, again, we have if then, so the arrow goes by the then. Person is a male, this is Q. That person is not a father, this would be not P. So this we would write as Q arrow not P, which we would say as if Q then not P. There is a variety of ways to say this in English. So we have first if P then Q. You could also say Q if P. You could say P is sufficient for Q. You could say Q is necessary for P. You could say P only if Q. And last, you could say only if Q, P. So a lot of variety how you could say the conditional. Our next type we have is the biconditional statement. Here, the compound statement, P if and only if Q is symbolized by, and this is an arrow, it's a double arrow where it's just pointing both directions. The phrase if and only if can also be abbreviated to IFF if you prefer. Okay, so for this one we have P represents the word is run. Q represents the word has 396 meanings. So we're going to write each of these sentences in symbolic form. So this says the word has 396 meanings. So that's Q. If and only if is our double arrow. The word is run. So this is P. So we write this as Q double arrow P, or Q if and only if P. Next, we have the word is not run. So that's not P. If and only if, our double arrow. The word does not have 396 meanings. So that's not Q. So here we would write not P, double arrow, not Q. Or we would say not P if and only if, not Q. There's several ways we can say this in English. So we could say P if and only if Q. You could say Q if and only if P. You could say if P, then Q, and if Q, then P. Because basically what the biconditional means is that this statement is true in both directions. Okay, so that's why it's both of those conditionals. Next, we could say P is necessary and sufficient for Q. And last, we could say Q is necessary and sufficient for P. Okay, so next we're going to express symbolic statements with parentheses in English. So here we have not, and then in parentheses, P and Q. So the way that we would express this, anytime you have the not symbol outside parentheses, this indicates you're going to start your statement with, it is not true that. So again, anytime you see that on the outside, you start with, it is not true that. And on the inside, we would say P and Q. Next, we have P and Q in parentheses. Then we have the biconditional and then R. So here we would say P and Q if and only if R. Here's our next one. P represents he earns $105,000 yearly. Q represents he is often happy. And we have to write the symbolic statements in words. So I want you to take a few minutes to do these three, please. Okay, for A, we have the negation in front of P and Q. So this one we would say, it is not true that. And then we have P, so he earns $105,000 yearly and is often happy. For B, we have not Q and P. So we would say he is not often happy and he earns $105,000 yearly. For our last one, we have the negation out in front of the parentheses again. So we're going to start with, it is not true that. If he is often happy, then he earns $105,000 yearly. In general, when we translate the symbolic statement into English, the simple statements in parentheses appear on the same side of the comma. So for number 6 here, we have P represents the plant is fertilized, Q represents the plant is not watered, and R represents the plant wilts. So we're going to write each of these in words. So I want you to take a few minutes here to try to write these in words and pay careful attention to where you're placing the comma. Okay, so for our first one, if you notice we have P and not Q together, then we have our if then, and then we have not are. Okay, so again, in parentheses, that set of parentheses is going to come before the comma, and then we'll put the comma around the if then part. Okay, so we have if, and then we're going to write our P and not Q, so we'll say the plant is fertilized and the plant is watered. Notice here Q was the plant is not watered, so if we're doing the negation, it would be watered, comma, then the plant does not wilt. For our next one, we have P and then we have together not Q arrow to our not R. So that's our if not Q, then not R. So here we would say P is the plant is fertilized. And now we'll do the if then part. If the plant is watered, then the plant does not wilt. Okay, next we're going to talk about the dominance of connectives. So basically this means what we're going to be looking at least and most important when placing parentheses and commas in our statements. So for our dominance of connectives, we have least, we start with 1, this is negation. And so our symbol for negation is the little tilde. And in words, this is going to be not or no. Second, we actually have 2 things. So I'm going to split this. We have the conjunction and the disjunction, meaning they have the same level of dominance in our statements. So conjunction, remember, is, it looks like the upside down V, and this is representing and statements. Disjunction looks like a V, and this represents or statements. Third, we have the conditional, and this looks like the single arrow, and this represents if, then. And then our most dominant is going to be the biconditional. And this is the double arrow, and you say if and only if. Okay, so it says if a symbolic statement appears without parentheses, statements before and after the most dominant connective should be grouped. So if I look at 7 here, it says to clarify by inserting parentheses. So the most dominant connective, we have if then, we have and not. So the most dominant is our if-then statement, which means I'm going to put parentheses here around Q and not R. Okay, so I would write this as P arrow parentheses Q and not R. For our next one here, we have and then our if then and a not. And so for this one, we have, again, the if then is the most dominant, so I'm going to put parentheses around P and Q. So this is going to look like P and Q, and then our if then symbol, not R. Next, we have P, if and only if, and then we have Q, if then symbol, and our R. And so then for this one, this is going to look like our most dominant is the if and only if. So we'll put parentheses around the if Q then R. So we have P, if and only if, and then in parentheses our if Q then R. The next one's similar. Again, if and only if is the most dominant. So we'll put the if P then Q in parentheses. So if P then Q, then if and only if R. For this next one, we have an if then, and an or. So if then is the most dominant, so we're actually going to have two sets of parentheses for this one. So this would be P and not Q inside parentheses. Then we have our symbol for if then. And then we'll have our R or S in the other set of parentheses. And now for this last one, we have P and Q or R. So this one actually is not going to have any parentheses because for this one, it's the same level of dominance. All right, the last thing we have for today is we're going to write each compound statement below in symbolic form. And the first one says, if there is too much homework or a teacher is boring, then I do not take that class. So let's say that P represents too much homework. Q could be the teacher is boring. And then R could be take the class. Just so that way we're all using the same letters. Okay, so we have in here, we have an or. We also have if, then. So remember those go together. And then we have there's too much homework is a statement. And then we have teacher is boring. And then we have I do not take that class. So if I'm looking at my connectives here, I have an or, my if then is here. The if then is more dominant, which means I'm going to put this first part in parentheses. So too much homework is P, teacher is boring, Q. So I have P or Q in parentheses. Then I do not take the class. This is going to be tilde R or not R. For our last one here, it says there's too much homework, comma, or if a teacher is boring, then I do not take that class. So I have or. We also have the if then statement, and again, that goes together. Now, if then is more dominant, however, we do have this comma here, okay? So you have to pay attention to the comma because the comma is what's splitting our sentence here. So we have there is too much homework, P, or Then we have, if a teacher is boring, then I do not take that class. So this is going to go in parentheses. Q, arrow, not R. Again, the comma is very important because the comma tells us that that's where you're splitting your sentence. And if you notice, there's no comma with the if then, so that's going to be grouped together. So this one will be written as P or, and then parentheses, if Q, then not R. And that's the end for today.